In November 2024, as the global economic environment grows increasingly complex, the Chinese government introduced a series of fiscal stimulus measures, injecting trillions of yuan to address local debt and economic downturn pressures. However, looking deeper into the motives behind this wave of stimulus, is it merely to get through the end of the year, or does it leave room for tackling more profound economic challenges? It now seems that this 1.2 trillion yuan plan is just an appetizer, with a larger fiscal arsenal likely reserved for adjustments in response to Trump's anticipated policies on China after he takes office in 2025. Welcome to another look at finance. Subscribe to avoid missing out on more insightful content. Is this 1.2 trillion yuan plan a temporary relief or a life-saving measure? This time, China has announced a high-level fiscal policy aimed at easing hidden local government debts through a debt restructuring plan. The 1.2 trillion yuan stimulus includes new local government special bonds, hidden debt swaps, and the restructuring of shantytown renovation debt. The policy aims to relieve local debt pressures on one hand and maintain the cash flow of local governments to support economic vitality on the other. However, the scale of 1.2 trillion yuan has not met market expectations, and the capital markets have not responded with a significant rebound. In reality, this plan only helps local governments get through the traditional year-end hurdle in the Chinese economy, while larger-scale fiscal tools seem to be held back, possibly awaiting the stance of the new U.S. administration. Since 2023, China's economic growth has notably slowed, with the real estate market and local government debt crises gradually emerging, and total social financing hovering at low levels. In this context, Finance Minister Lan Fuan proposed a debt restructuring policy to address local governments' significant debt burdens in three ways. First, issuing 800 billion yuan annually in new special local government bonds to replace existing hidden debts. Second, issuing 2 trillion yuan annually in debt swapping bonds from 2024 to 2026. And third, repaying shantytown renovation debts due after 2029 as per contract terms. Overall, this 1.2 trillion yuan debt arrangement seems to cover local government debt issues for the next 5 years, while the short-term 600 billion yuan stimulus is merely a preliminary trial. Why has this 1.2 trillion yuan stimulus failed to boost market confidence? In 2024, China's economy, heavily reliant on local government borrowing to drive infrastructure, real estate, and consumption, has shown clear weaknesses, especially as the U.S. tightens financial policies and global economic growth slows. Although the 1.2 trillion yuan stimulus provides some immediate relief, it does not fundamentally change the issues of rising debt and sluggish economic vitality. In fact, by the end of 2024, China's core economic policy has shifted towards stabilizing rather than advancing. The current debt restructuring is not a complete repayment, but a transitional measure designed to extend timelines and increase available funds, enabling local governments to maintain basic operations. Official data shows that by 2023, China's local government hidden debt had reached 60 trillion yuan, but the Ministry of Finance has only acknowledged 14.3 trillion yuan, leaving the central government's stance on the remaining hidden debt ambiguous. The use of special local government bonds rather than treasury bonds or special treasury bonds to resolve debt issues indicates the central government's reluctance to assume full responsibility for hidden debt. Consequently, the market has interpreted the limited impact of China's fiscal policy as a further blow to confidence. A large fiscal arsenal is waiting for Trump's return to the White House. The key to China's current stimulus policy is that the 1.2 trillion yuan is not the final rescue measure. Larger-scale fiscal stimulus seems to be waiting on the new U.S. administration's stance. In early November, Trump was re-elected as president, introducing a significant variable in China-U.S. relations. During the campaign, Trump and his supporters frequently criticized China for its competitive tactics in global trade and technology, even threatening more aggressive tariffs and export controls. Now, the market broadly expects that after taking office on January 20, 2025, Trump will continue a confrontational stance against China, aiming to constrain China in core areas like technology and supply chains. Therefore, the 1.2 trillion yuan stimulus announced by China on November 8 seems aimed at stabilizing the current market and ensuring fiscal stability before year-end, without fully deploying its actual fiscal arsenal. From the perspective of policy layout, China's leadership appears to be preparing for a more complex global economic situation, particularly in light of potential new sanctions from the U.S. In reality, China may adjust the scale and direction of its economic stimulus based on the severity of Trump's China policies. China's fiscal policy will likely remain limited in its ability to spur economic recovery, merely offering temporary relief. In the face of many constraints, the current fiscal stimulus is unlikely to drive China's economic recovery. For example, although M2 money supply has grown at a double-digit rate since early 2024, weak market confidence and sluggish consumer demand have hindered the flow of liquidity into the real economy. The debt burden on local governments remains, with this round of stimulus only providing short-term relief rather than triggering broad-based economic growth. Moreover, market expectations of government intervention have shifted. China's past policies had strong short-term impacts, creating a belief that policies could reverse any downturn. However, with growing debt complexity and slowing global economic growth, confidence in the government's ability to support the market has gradually weakened. This round of debt restructuring stresses the whoever borrows repays principle, clarifying to capital markets that the central government will not assume excessive risks or pour fiscal resources into a bottomless pit of accumulated debt. With Trump's hawkish stance on China back in play, China now faces not only slower domestic growth and high debt pressures, but also a tougher external environment. For years, China's economy has relied on global markets, especially exports to the U.S., but may now face more restrictions. The greater risk is that the U.S. could strengthen economic cooperation with its allies to isolate China, tightening global supply chains against China. This undoubtedly adds more pressure on the Chinese government to make significant breakthroughs in internal economic restructuring and external trade strategies. In this context, China's fiscal stimulus policy is likely to shift toward a defensive stance, aiming to stimulate growth through internal demand as Trump's China policies grow tougher. The government may increase investments in infrastructure, rural revitalization, and strategic emerging industries to reduce dependence on foreign trade. However, this transformation will require time and substantial fiscal resources. The 1.2 trillion yuan plan is just a preliminary test, far from enough to sustain long-term recovery. Although China has retained significant fiscal reserves to address future economic challenges, the impact of these policies will be constrained by multiple factors. First, an aging population is already impacting China's labor market and consumption patterns. In 2023, China's marriage rate dropped to less than half of the previous decade's average, directly reducing demand in sectors like real estate and diminishing the long-term economic growth potential as demographic dividends decline. Second, although China has made progress in technological innovation, it remains constrained in core technologies. If China-U.S. tech decoupling intensifies, domestic innovation will face increasing challenges. Furthermore, China's industrial and consumption structures require adjustments as low value-added, high-pollution characteristics of traditional manufacturing necessitate a shift toward high-value, green industries. These issues will weaken the effect of fiscal stimulus, making it difficult for funds to reach high-growth economic sectors, creating a limited rescue scenario. China's economy currently faces multiple difficulties and challenges, and fiscal stimulus impacts remain limited, with the market adopting a relatively cautious outlook. Judging from this 1.2 trillion yuan stimulus, the Chinese government seems to be adopting a strategic wait-and-see approach, temporarily stabilizing the market, alleviating local government pressure, and retaining the initiative in decision-making. It's likely that after Trump officially takes office on January 20, 2025, China will further assess the required stimulus scale and sectors based on the specifics of Trump's China policy. If Trump adopts strict trade protection measures, China may implement more internal circulation policies to stimulate domestic consumption. Future stimulus plans will likely hinge on Trump administration policies, with China's policy toolkit kept flexible to address potential external shocks. To summarize this episode's key points, China's 1.2 trillion yuan stimulus announced on November 8 is merely an initial attempt to alleviate current economic pressures, with larger measures potentially adjusted based on the external environment in the coming months. Facing new rounds of aggressive U.S. policies, China's economic response strategy leans toward stabilization, with outcomes to be observed. Ultimately, with greater clarity on the new U.S. president's policy direction, China may introduce more targeted measures.